Hi guys, this week we are talking about active reading. So one of the first things that you want to do before you read is to understand your purpose. So why are you reading? And one of the best ways to understand this is to know how you're going to be assessed on it. So if you're studying for a multiple choice test, then you'll want to focus on details. If you're going to be writing an essay, then you need to have a thorough understanding of the main ideas, not necessarily all the nitty-gritty details, but just the big picture. If you're going to be asked to perform calculations or tasks, such as like in a statistics class or a math class, then you're just going to want to work problems, as many problems as you can, so that you get used to doing that and can kind of do it on the fly. Are you going to be summarizing some information for a presentation or report? If so, it's going to be similar to that of an essay, and just you want to especially make sure that you know how to say it in your own words, and you're also going to want to add visuals. And there's lots of different things that are going to affect your reading comprehension, such as your level of skills. So, for example, if you're trying to read something that is several years in advance of the material that you've already learned, that's going to require more concentration. It might not make as much sense as it would be once you've gotten more background under your belt. Your vocabulary level is going to matter, how well you can concentrate, your state of mind. So if you're in a bad mood, that can affect your concentration and your ability to comprehend what you're reading, and also distractions. So if you're at home, like a lot of us are, and there might be people coming and going and talking to you, that can also affect your comprehension. So if that's the case, you want to give yourself more time to really work with this material. Now, the thing about active reading is that it involves a lot of things. One thing that people tend to misunderstand when they come to college is just how much time reading actually takes. And primarily that's because they're only budgeting enough time to actually read it, like just read it. They'll just run their eyes over the page, literally read it, and then that's done. But that's not the end-all be-all of reading. That's one thing. I mean, obviously you have to read it, but there's all sorts of different things that you need to be doing while you're reading. You need to actually do something while you're reading. So I have a list here of things that you can be looking for and doing in order to interact with the material, because ultimately you're reading for comprehension and the ability to recall that information later on. Now, there are a couple of popular reading systems, and so you don't need to use necessarily a specific system, but these are a couple of common ones: the Fivepart reading system and the SQ3R system. And they're very similar to each other. The Fivepart reading system, the 5 parts are prepare, preview, predict, process, and paraphrase. So when it comes to prepare, some things you want to do is check your attitude. Okay, one thing you want to do is check your attitude. If you're in a bad mood, are you in the mindset of, okay, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to try to master this? If you've already made up your mind that you don't care about material, it's going to be a lot harder for you to comprehend what you're reading. You'll want to read during high energy times. If you get sleepy really early, then 11 o'clock at night might not be the best time to read. But if you're a night owl, maybe it is. You'll want to eliminate distractions as best as possible, and you'll want to think about what you already know about the material. We'll talk about that a little bit later. You also want to preview the material, so look at the title, the chapter headings, the illustrations and key terms. Look for main ideas that connect concepts, terms, and formulas. You need to predict questions. So ask yourself questions about what you're about to read. So what is it? What conditions are involved? What else does it relate to? What are some possible test questions? So if you see a section labeled, like proactive and retroactive interference, this is just something I'm thinking of, but just a simple question like, what is the difference between proactive and retroactive interference? And then you read the material to try to answer your question. As you read, you'll want to process that information. You want to actually do something with it. So physically or verbally do something with it. Either create an outline or underline or highlight key sections, or write down definitions and facts or important concepts. You want to be very sparing about this, though. Sometimes we'll talk about highlighting in more detail a little bit later, but you want to resist highlighting more than 10% of a page. And then finally, you want to paraphrase. So after each section, pause and summarize each section in your own words, either out loud or in writing. Okay, so just you want to try to get into the habit of doing this sort of thing. The SQ3R system is extremely similar. In fact, all the reading systems are very similar because these are just the things that you need to do to really solidify information in your mind. So the S stands for survey or skim. So here you would look at headings and illustrations. I do have a video link up there if you want to see more about this. The Q stands for question. So as you're going through the different sections, again, create a question, some kind of question. In fact, you can write down a list of these questions. Just keep them simple. What is this? What's the main idea? What are some examples? Why is this important? So write down some questions, and then as you go through the reading, you'll answer those questions. That kind of helps your mind from wandering. It also kind of primes your brain to look for that information, and believe me, there's neuroscience behind this. Finally, you want to read the information. Okay, create those questions, read to find the information to answer your questions. Then you want the second R stands for recite or write. So you can either paraphrase again out loud or in writing. So this should all sound very familiar. There's very little difference between these reading systems, but there it is. And then review. So with review, you want to review the chapter summary, go back over each section. Did you answer all of your questions? Do you have any new questions? Excuse me. So you want to do all these things. So this way, if you go into class and the teacher says, "Do you have any questions?" You might, if you've already read the material and done this, then the things that you already understand. And if there's something you need more explanation about, maybe it will be covered in the lecture. And at the end of the lecture, if you still haven't received the answer or you still don't understand something and the teacher says, "Are there any questions?" it'll be easy for you to raise your hand and say, "Yeah, could you explain this again?" Or "What was the difference between this and that?" Or "I didn't catch this." Because professors have this awful tendency to give you like 0.5 seconds to ask a question. They'll say, "Are there any questions?" "No? Good, moving on." You're like, wait, no, I have questions. So this'll help with that. I'm trying to go to the next slide. There we go. So those are some specific reading specific reading systems that you can use. In general, though, even if you're not using a formal system, there are just general strategies to use. So I already talked about determining your purpose. You'll want to set reading goals. So, for example, I want to read for an hour a day, or I want to, create a page of notes on my reading material per day, something like that. But just set goals. You want to make sure that you can concentrate. Okay, so set aside a time and a place where, even if you have to lock your bedroom door and then go into the bathroom and lock the bathroom door so that the kids or whatever person or something just doesn't come in, leave your phone, turn it off, leave it in another room, whatever you need to do in order to concentrate. Create an outline. So anything that you've read started out as an outline. And so one good way to approach this is to try to kind of reverse engineer what you think that outline might have been. Identify those keywords and key concepts. If it is in bold, or it is in a chart, or it is italicized, you want to make a note of that. Make connections between different things that you're reading. So is it related to something that you've experienced in your life, or how is it different or similar to the material that you guys went over in the previous chapter? Things like that. That'll help solidify that information in your mind. Compare notes with people. This is why study groups, this is one of the reasons why study groups are so important, is that each of you take notes on material or on a lecture, And then you can come together and compare notes. So someone might have caught something that you didn't, you might have caught something that they didn't, but together you have the power. Take frequent breaks. Your brain needs a break. Okay, now this does not mean, okay, I read for 15 minutes, now I'm going to binge watch 2 hours of Netflix. That's not what we mean. Kind of the opposite. Maybe work for 45 minutes to an hour, give yourself a 10 to 15 minute break, and then come back to it. You want to integrate different learning styles, so not just watch something or not just read something, but see it, hear it, do something with it. You can draw doodles or make notes or discuss it with someone. So just do lots of things with the material. I am terrible at understanding what I'm reading if I'm just reading it, and my mind wanders. But if I also just hear it, also my mind wanders. But for some reason, if I see something and hear it at the same time, I'm able to focus and concentrate on it. I have in the past recorded myself as I'm reading a chapter and then gone back and reread the chapter while listening to myself read the chapter. And I don't know why, but that just works for me. So if that's what you got to do to graduate, that's what I had to do to graduate, whatever it takes, okay? And then use the entire text. There are glossaries and appendices and things like that. Explore your textbook and see what's available, because some things can be quite handy. Oopsie. Some reviewing strategies real quick. Summarizing in writing is one. So after you've read a little section or maybe a page, close the book and just spend 5 minutes summarizing. Just close it and be like, what did I just read? And just imagine that you read a section and you closed it, and your friend or family members came up and said, what are you reading about? What would be like your 30-second elevator speech about that? Summarize it out loud. Pretend you're teaching. Like if you actually had to say, it's like, okay, out loud, what did I just learn? Okay, so if you can't say it in words or in writing, chances are you need to go back and look at that material again. And then review and reflect on it often. Okay, think about things within 24 hours. You want to read the chapter and then take some notes, and then reread your notes within the next 24 hours. And then once a week, glance over all your notes from that week. There's something about reviewing that information, reflecting on it over and over again that helps. And finally, activate your background knowledge. Sometimes when we're reading, it can seem really dense and confusing and we don't know what's going on. If you can't visualize what's going on in what you're reading about, it might mean that you're not comprehending it as deeply as you could. So if you were to read this paragraph, I won't read it out loud, but if you were to read this paragraph without any context, you might have a hard time really explaining to someone what's going on or what it is that you're reading. But if you first are told, oh, this paragraph is about doing laundry, then as you go through it, it would make sense. You'll have a visual on what they're talking about. So if they say arrange things into different groups, that's a very abstract concept until you realize, oh, well, if they're talking about laundry, okay, so different groups, that would be things like, colors versus whites or delicates or things like that, okay? So do that. Before you start reading, think, what do I already know about this? And that can sometimes help with understanding the material that you're currently reading. All right, I will leave that here, and then we're going to talk about building habits and some other things to help you with your reading comprehension.